Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for part 5 of our series, Uncertainty to Insight. Today, we will address how companies can provide reassurance to employees and facilitate their return to work by implementing health and safety protocols in the workplace. We do have the Q&A feature available, so you can submit questions through that option, and we will ensure you receive a response following today's webinar. Alternatively, in the coming days, you may email any questions to us at marketing@yoursummit.com. I will display that email address again near the end of our session. So let's get started. We have 2 guests joining us today. Our first is Gracen Johnsen. She is a Senior Vice President, HR Consulting for Summit, responsible for the firm's human resource consulting disciplines, helping clients achieve their best practice and regulatory compliance goals. Enjoying a career as an HR professional spanning 20+ years, Gracen has served in the roles of HR manager, HR director, and HR consultant across a broad range of profit and nonprofit organizations and industries. Gracen is certified as a senior professional in human resources, SHRM Senior Certified Professional, a certified strategic planner, and an NASD trained mediator. Our moderator today is Kaci Skidgel. Kaci is a president of Retirement Plans for Summit. Kaci is the author of the book Path to the Summit, Strategies to Reach Your Company's Peak Retirement, and she was acknowledged as one of the top women advisors by the National Association of Plan Advisors for 5 consecutive years, and more recently named by Financial Times as one of the top financial advisors. I will now pass the session off to Kaci and Gracen.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. We've been receiving such great feedback from attendees each week, and I personally am receiving emails about the value of these webinars that we're doing. So we just want to make sure that we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to attend today. I know this topic of returning to work or re-entering the workforce has been percolating since federal government and respective states and local government has started to really address how we reopen America a few weeks ago. And I've received feedback from clients. I know Gracen, as we were preparing for today, has as well. Certain clients of ours that are saying, you know, we're an essential business and it's just going on as it has been for the last several weeks, and this isn't really affecting us. And then on the other side of it, we do have employers who are saying, yeah, we sent everyone in our workforce home, and so we know that it's all over the board with respect to businesses and organizations and how they're handling this. So Gracen, before I jump in today, wanted to share just one thing that has popped up for us in retirement plans, just announced by the Department of Labor and Employee Benefit Security Administration. For years, we've been asking the Department of Labor to relax the required disclosure rules and allow for more electronic disclosures. And so with the COVID challenge that we're going through right now due to remote work, the DOL did come back and give some extension of time for employers for notices, benefit statements, those kinds of things, 5,500. I feel like you're gonna hear more, just pretty hot off the presses. And so I felt like that's something worth noting, and know that you will continue to hear a little bit more. But what the Department of Labor is saying is make good faith effort. They recognize that employers sometimes are having problems getting to the office in order to send disclosures, notices, and things. And I know that's affecting the benefit side as well. So we'll continue to field these questions across the spectrum of benefits. As all of you are aware, we are a benefits insurance investment firm. So as Todd had mentioned last week, if you have questions that maybe you don't know where they fit, I got a couple of them actually yesterday. Make sure that you know that Summit is a resource, and if we don't know the answer, we will get with one of our partners to make sure we do get you the answer. So Gracen, really I'm excited to dialogue with you today and to talk about these HR topics. I was a little disappointed because I noticed your bio had no mention of your true identity, and you probably know what I'm about to say, but I want everyone on this call today to know that I call Gracen the legend. And so I'm just going to brag a bit about her for a second because she will not brag about herself. She's very humble, but she did receive the HR Legend Award for SHRM in 2017. And if I recall correctly, this is for people who have demonstrated leadership and innovation, among other things, for your HR service. And so I always tell Gracen, you are Summit's legend, and I'm so proud to get to work with you, Gracen. And so with that, Gracen, I know you have been fielding a ton of calls and helping our account managers along the way. But as we move back to this new normal, set the stage for our attendees. What should employers be doing throughout this recovery period?
Well, that's an excellent question, and thank you for that introduction, Kaci. I just feel like sometimes I'm a legend in my own mind. but I appreciate it. And yes, I have been getting a lot of questions, and frankly, it's nice to be getting questions now about how do we get back? How do we bring our employees back? Because for the last few weeks, I have been talking to them about furloughs and layoffs and how that impacts their benefits and how it impacts their wages and unemployment, and which for me as an HR professional, that's a sad conversation, but it was a necessary conversation. And so we were trying to figure out, how do we keep our employees? How do we make sure that they're taken care of? Well, now the conversation is switched, and it's how do we bring everybody back? And how do we keep them safe when we bring them back? And what order do we bring them back? And the White House and in our case, the state of Oklahoma, and our governor and the mayor of my city, Oklahoma City, have come up with a 3-phase plan to allow employers to start thinking about how to bring employees back. And one of the first things that keeps coming up is plan, 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 plan. As an HR professional, and those of you who are in HR departments, you know that we are always writing and updating policies, and that's part of the planning. It's part of the strategy of how to bring people back. So during this phase in, what employers need to be doing is updating those policies. And now we also need to add policies we hadn't really considered before. I do a lot of employee handbooks, and not every employee handbook has a pandemic policy in it. Because coronavirus isn't alone. And so we need to be more prepared. And with that preparation is, how do we handle it? What steps do we take? So we need to be doing policies about their safety, about social distancing, about travel, about what are we going to do about vendors and clients coming into the office, and what are we going to be doing when we go out back into the workplace. So planning is really what employers should be doing right now. They should be thinking about, are we going to require our employees to wear face masks while they are in the office or in the workplace? A colleague of mine who has been in the office during all this time made a comment that he has been going down to a restaurant in the lobby of our office, and it's to get a sandwich or a salad, and he had noticed that not all of the servers were wearing masks, which was a concern for him. Where another little cafe in our building, the servers were all wearing masks. And that's going to be mandatory as the restaurants open up. The social distancing, having tables 6 feet apart, the church is opening again, having alternate pews and people in the pews sitting 6 feet apart. So it's planning, how are we going to structure our office? And are we going to phase in our employees? So that it's going to be so dependent on the industry, so dependent on the structure of the workplace and the size of the workplace.
Sure. Well, and I think that's kind of a great lead in, Gracen. One of the things that I have been doing is on a weekly basis, there's a ERISA attorney that has been doing kind of his own town hall and great insights that he's been providing. And you know me, I'm a lifelong learner, just like you are, and love to learn and to grow and to hear those things. And so he was talking about their law firm had done an internal study or they did a study with their clients, and it was employers from 1 to 500 employees, and how are they handling in Oklahoma, it's called the hours plan, which is open up and recover safely. And so with that, this attorney had said that they asked the question, well, what is the primary concern about reopening? And for employers, they said 80% of the employers said that the safety, which is why I believe today is so timely, 80% of them said that the safety of their employees and their clients is number one priority. And then I was actually just yesterday looking at a record keeper in the retirement plan space that had done another survey, and it was from April 23rd to the 27th.
Mm-hmm.
They inquired of thousands of their plan sponsors, and they asked kind of the same type of question. And the number one, 73% of their respondents said that protecting their workers' health and safety was number one. And the number two for them was being able to communicate with employees and customers. And so I thought that's just so interesting to me. Obviously, you said plan, plan, plan. Well, you plan, then you communicate that over to your employees, but safety as the backdrop, and then communication. Gracen, what are the considerations? You kind of alluded to it, phase 1, 2, and 3, and we all know that each state and has these dates. But for employers and individuals, what would you say, and even across industries, what are these considerations we need to be aware of?
Well, the considerations are, you're absolutely right, it's safety. And it's also reassuring your employees that they're coming back into a safe workplace. There's OSHA's general duty clause that most of us have to comply with, that it is our responsibility as employers to provide a safe and healthy workplace. So what I'm getting feedback with some employees is, I'm fearful to come back. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be important for employers to enter into that process that we're more accustomed to entering into when employees ask for reasonable accommodation, for example, under the ADA, to say, what are you afraid of? Are you a vulnerable part of the vulnerable groups, or is it fear? And it's important for employers to communicate to their employees that this is what we are doing. The CDC, OSHA, we are following these guidelines to keep our workplace clean. We are wiping down surfaces. We are requesting that people wear the masks entering, exiting, and leaving. We are asking that our conference rooms be limited, have a capacity on how many people can be there. So rather than sitting side by side around the conference table that, for example, that I'm sitting at the head of right now, have every other chair. And also the break room, to consider the common areas, to keep them clean, to keep them apart. Washing hands, that, we have been learned, our mothers kept talking to us as children. Wash your hands, wash your hands. Well, that's become so very important, because it's one of the things that I have learned with all of the reading, we were getting so much information, is that this virus, this highly contagious and dangerous virus, stays on, for example, cardboard for up to a day. It stays on plastics for up to 3 days. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you've washed your hands. Some employees may prefer to wear gloves, but but if you're wearing gloves, you're still touching surfaces, so you don't want to bring it back up to your face. Mm-hmm. And so it's just going to be really important that we be aware of that, and for employers to be communicating clearly to the employees, this is what we are doing to keep you safe. We are following CDC guidelines. We are following, that is actually doing a fogging spray every day, because their employees were concerned about it. So it's and also it might be good for employers to consider some employees may need to continue working remotely, and to start phasing in employees on depending on the type of work they do. That's not appropriate for all industries and all businesses, but to really be having a strategy on how to do that communication. Employers should be reaching out to their employees and just keeping them up to speed. Maybe having town halls too. Once you bring employees back, have little mini town halls with your employees every week and reminding them about the social distancing. We are so used to going into our offices and talking to our colleagues, sitting down next to somebody and looking over their shoulder at their computer screen. And we need to understand that we can't do that kind of thing anymore. So there really needs to be somebody who is responsible for reminding employees about the social distancing, to reminding them about the surfaces and washing their hands and that sort of thing.
Well, and Gracen, just as you say that, I am impressed with so many organizations and just businesses that are taking those things very seriously and that are communicating. Goes back to, what do people need? They need communication over and over again. I know our team specifically, I know within each kind of division or company of Summit, we are having those individual meetings on a regular basis. And so thankfully we haven't checked out of the communication piece of it, but it is important to continue that. So even some good things for me to remember today as you're going through this. So Gracen, kind of shifting just a little bit, what steps should we be taking if an employee, we get people back and then we hear an employee has tested positive or they are diagnosed with COVID? I mean, obviously we all hope and pray that that will not happen. But what can we do? What can we advise? Can we advise the rest of the employees and alert them? So what does that look like? What are some best practices on that?
That's an excellent question because I'm getting that a lot from employers. Is what if I bring everybody back and all of a sudden somebody tests positive? But one of the things, part of the safety considerations, is that the EEOC and OSHA have both come out, and Department of Labor, all three of them have come out and said that it is okay for employers to take employees' temperatures. It is okay for employers now to do the testing. It is okay to ask employees if they are exhibiting symptoms like the deep hacking cough, for example, and to have these conversations with the employees. We are so accustomed as employers of being fearful to talk to employees of things like that because of the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and honoring their privacy. But that's part of the planning that employers can have when they bring their employees back. It's requiring them to take their temperature, to be tested before they come back to work, and then every day as they come into the office. And I know employers, you mentioned the essential businesses who have already been doing that anyway. They've been requiring anybody that comes into their building to take the temperature. So you have your employees back and you have an employee that has exhibited symptoms, or you have an employee who has, in a very responsible manner, disclosed that a family member, for example, has tested positive. What do we do? Well, if an employee has tested positive, first one, you need to isolate and quarantine that employee from the others. In essential businesses like the long haul trucking companies, for example, they cannot send their employees home for 14 days. We can, but they cannot. So they just need to make sure that they have quarantined and isolated that employee, but send that employee home. Then you need to actually talk to their coworkers, all the people that they have had contact with, the close contact with, and advise them that an employee has tested positive so that they are aware of it and they can take steps to test and monitor their own symptoms in their own selves. Also, it's going to be really important to go back and clean and disinfect your when that has happened, employees. But don't disclose the identity to all your employees. Instead, to let them know that this has happened, this is what we're doing, and to notify and advise them. Okay,
so what I heard you say, Gracen, there was a little bit of a cutout there, is like, if you do hear, and it is provided to HR that yes, someone has tested positive, do not identify to your employees who that person is, but just you let the rest of the employees know.
Right. You do need to notify them that that has happened, and then tell them what steps you've taken. That
Okay.
the employee has been sent home, and that we have cleaned and disinfected, and just again, communication. Because if we are not communicating to our employees, they're talking to each other, and they may be spreading rumor and gossip that may not be accurate. So it's really important. Employees need to know, and employees can handle news. They just need to know what it is.
Perfect. I appreciate that. That's a great response. So Gracen, let's say we ask an employee, or are we able to ask an employee to stay home or to leave if they have exhibited these symptoms? I mean, it sounds like that's kind of an obvious. What do we do here?
Yes, if you have an employee that comes in temperature and it's 100.4, you can send that employee home.
Okay.
And require them to isolate and quarantine, and of course go and be tested. So it's, as I said, the EEOC has really lifted a lot. They've kind of opened up a little bit because this is a pandemic. Things are different, and we really need to be talking to our employees, and we are also allowed to ask them about their symptoms.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So I heard you say, Gracen, and I believe that this was also a part of the ERISA attorney that I was listening to, but you did mention about taking people's temperature. And so it sounds like, you know, the ERISA attorney stat, I think, was that over 50%, closer to 60% of employers that were surveyed said that they plan to actually take temperatures of employees. Is that something you do on a daily basis? Is that something that they do on an individual basis? Can we count on that as an employer? It sounds like there's a little bit of leeway here in everything that I've been reading, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, most of the employers that I'm talking to have purchased the temperature gauges. They just go across the forehead, and they are taking the employees' temperatures and anybody who comes into their workplace's temperatures daily. Because this, you can be asymptomatic for quite a while, but even though you're asymptomatic, you're still contagious. So they've been doing it daily. Other employers are doing the honor system and asking employees to take it themselves and as they come in. And other employers are using questionnaires for their employees. So much of it, Kaci, depends really on the industry. Let's take, for example, the little restaurant that we were talking about earlier. It's important that those employees wear the mask the whole time they're in the workplace. They're right next to each other. They are dealing with the public. So they're in a high risk, like healthcare. For organizations such as ours, where we are not dealing with the public all the time, it may be good for our employer to say, I want you to wear the face mask entering and exiting the building when you go downstairs to get lunch. But we have separate offices. So if you're in your office and you can safely social distance, then don't wear the mask. So it's so much of it depends on the industry. And it's going to be important that the different employers look at their own workplace, their own employees, their own industry.
So Gracen, something that you just brought up and you said, you know, and it just kind of spurred something in my own mind is when I know that, for example, for us, we have sales representatives within our company, but we also have people out, you know, that are vendor partners that are coming in to see us, or we also have customers that we serve. And so just checking from an overall perspective, what is best practice for if Summit has an account manager that needs to go out and see employees, or if we have someone that decides to come into our office, are there any best practices that we could use or that employers that are on the line could use to help make those decisions? And I know it's a timing deal, but what are your thoughts?
Well, as we were talking earlier, you can actually require people coming into your office to take their temperatures. I went to see a client myself not too long ago for something that couldn't wait, and they took my temperature when I came in, and because they're requiring it of everybody. But also, you need to limit who comes into your offices right now. You need to determine who it's essential that they come into your office. With video conferencing now, can that meeting be done through Zoom? So to be talking about that, but it's also going to be important for our employees as they are going out into the world to ask the company that they are going to, what are your policies and practices? Mm-hmm. What do you need me to be doing? But also it's important for individuals to protect themselves. So that the face mask again, wear that when you go out. And then once you get to the meeting, if you can still social distance, if they're comfortable with that, then perhaps take off that mask. But the social distancing, we're talking 6 feet. And, but it's really not that hard to be 6 feet away from somebody and still have a conversation with them. So it's that social distancing, that's something that I'm hearing over and over and over again, is the social distancing.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, is we have to work together with our clients, with our partners. And, you know, I would say from our perspective, we probably will limit the people that come in to our offices and do things like Zoom or go to the different meeting opportunities. I think that's a great way to put that, and then take the guidance from our clients. That's a really good reminder for me, Gracen. So thank you on that. So Gracen, I do know though that this is pretty fluid. I know that it's changing, and that really time is what's going to dictate when things will even continue to open up more, and over the course of time, we're going to know what the right time is. But obviously not everyone's going to agree, you know, on all of these things. There's likely some people who say you waited too long, or other people that say you did it too early. And so, you know, from my vantage point, it's like employers need to, what I'm hearing you say back to that communication is employers need to use their best judgment on all of these, and go from there. So kind of one of the other things that kind of popped up that you were just talking about with respect to social distancing, we talked about it even here, and you mentioned conference rooms, common areas. So I think of like reception areas and things like that. Anything else that you want to add on conference rooms, break rooms, common areas?
Well, you mentioned receptionists, and we really do need to protect them because they're the ones that the public is seeing. So your receptionist may need to wear the mask, or there may be, I have seen companies put actual plexiglass between the receptionist and people coming in to protect them. So those are considerations to think about. Also, it was mentioned that there are times where, as employees, we all get together for a birthday celebration, and we all gather in the conference room or the break room, and we have the cake and all of that. Those kind of things right now, not a good plan. We need to think about that. I did a job interview yesterday and it was a panel job interview, and we all did it on video conferencing, and it worked just fine. Mm-hmm. So if you have that kind of technology, do that. But also something that employers need to think about, you're absolutely right, Kaci, it's very fluid. And as we go through the phases, the reason why we travel through the phases is that we are meeting certain guidelines that we've been successful with, that the COVID virus has plateaued, there's fewer people being infected, there's fewer deaths. And as it becomes fluid, as we become more open, saying essential travel. Well, in phase 2, it may be non-essential travel. So for example, you're in Tulsa, I'm in Oklahoma City. Right now, it really wasn't important for me to come to Tulsa to do what we're doing now. But at another point, you know, it would be nice to come to Tulsa so that we could be together, 6 feet apart in the conference room. But so what the point there is that these policies are not carved in stone. It's going to be important for employers to look at their processes, look at their policies, and perhaps back off from some of them as we go through the phases. And also, I mentioned the ADA and that it's okay for employers to ask about symptoms. That doesn't mean that the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, has gone away. We still have to remember there are still individuals with disabilities that are unrelated to COVID, and we still need to follow those kind of employment laws for non-COVID related issues.
Sure. Okay. So, and I'm glad that you touched on the travel policy. You know, I know that from a flying perspective is even different though from just a travel from one location like we have to another and things like that. So that's another one that I think is going to take a little bit of time to make some decisions there. So, Gracen, lastly, is there anything, you know, I always like to know, is there anything, Gracen, that's kind of surprised you? Is there anything that you would say with employers has been maybe an aha moment? You've talked to one of the organizations that you work with. I know, Gracen, you know, you're going to be on another conference call coming up here pretty quickly with employers from all over the United States. And so any aha moments, anyone that's doing forward thinking that you feel like might be something good for other HR professionals, employers to consider today?
That's an excellent question. And you're right. Some of the things that I am hearing from employers is that this situation has forced them to rethink the way they do business, to rethink about how their workforce looks, and to rethink just the structure. A really good example is that for years, the open office concept, allowing employees to interact with each other openly, and no walls between the offices, that has been a growing thing. Well, that's backing off, and employers are talking about they're beginning to put up partitions between the employees so that to protect them with the, again, social distancing. So their workplaces may be becoming more of the traditional workplace and the open workplace. Also, I've been talking to employers who are thinking about more flexible schedules and more flexible options. I've talked to some employers that are allowing employees, for example, to work from home a couple of days a week or remotely a couple of days a week and then come into the office a couple of days a week. Well, that has led to conversations. Well, how do we keep those employees engaged? How do we make sure that they remain part of the team? So I think that has been the aha moment, is that employers are actually thinking, they're rethinking how they are structuring their workplace. And so it's interesting how when in emergencies, it forces us to do that classic think outside the box.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it, is thinking outside of the box. And I have noted that with several of the companies and organizations that we get to work with. And, you know, I'm just so impressed with how people are finding ways to continue to be successful and to make it happen. And it really is all over the board, though. You hear of other organizations that are really stifled right now. So we're going to have every part of that and in between. Gracen, I appreciate all of this. I think we had a couple of questions, and I know one specifically, since we've got a few more minutes, that that we had talked about in preparation from today that had come in from a client, and I just wanted to kind of check in with you. This question from one of our employers said, can you explain the federal addition to Oklahoma employment benefits? And this employer specifically was saying, I know you have to qualify for Oklahoma unemployment before you can get additional federal funds. But what they're saying is they're an essential business. They have not laid off any employees. They don't intend to, but they're competing against unemployment benefits to hire employees. And so do you have any comments about that overall?
Well, the CARES Act, which has passed the federal pandemic unemployment compensation. I don't know who comes up with these names. It's impossible to say. And you have to read them because there's no way you can memorize them. You're right. For individuals who are qualifying for new or existing benefits through, for example, Oklahoma's traditional unemployment compensation program, that's providing that additional $600 per week to an individual's weekly benefit amount through July 21st. So there is a sunset clause on that. Interestingly enough, the pandemic unemployment assistance has also expanded unemployment insurance availability to self-fund to 1099 people, to self-employed individuals. So it's which usually is not available to them. So I understand their concern, but this does have a sunset clause. It only goes from the duration of benefits from February 1st, 2020. It does end July 31st, but it's really up to the OESC, Oklahoma Employment Security Commission, and the other state unemployment insurance to determine whether or not an employee is eligible for the COVID-related unemployment and the $600. And the $600, by the way, is coming from the federal government. So it's, again, state, as we have learned these last weeks, things change daily. So when that question came up, I actually went to the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission to see what they have posted lately. And but the planning, and also updates, stay aware, because new laws are being passed, things are being more rigid, things are becoming relaxed. It's fluid, to use your word, Kaci. So it's just think strategically, plan for now, and also plan ahead to see how this is going to evolve.
Sure. And Gracen, we had another question that came in, and I know we can always follow up after, but I didn't know if you're aware. One of the questions is, are there any free resources available to help train employees on social distancing, or where might an employer go to get, I know you've referred to a lot of times guidelines. I typically use the word best practices. What would you suggest to an employer who says, hey, give us some information for our employees?
Well, the best practices, there are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of law firms that are putting out really excellent information. There's other HR consultants, that is a resource. We can be a resource to our clients. I do a lot of training for clients that could be more specific. With the time that we had, really getting into the weeds with this has not been easy, but that's part of the communication, is the training the employees. And but to go to the CDC, to go to the Department of Labor, go to your local SHRM organization.
Okay.
There's a lot of resources out there.
That's a great point, Gracen. And I know you are such a resource to all of our clients, and we're thankful for that. So another question that was asked is, in a small business, if the employee tests positive, or a family member, and I know you kind of referenced this a little bit ago, are you able to ask if that information can be shared with the rest of the team? Let's say an employer that has, closely knit group, and there's less than, 45, 50 employees, and you feel like you're a close knit group. Are you able to actually share that information, or it's like, nope, that's off topic? I'm assuming I'd assume that if they share that information with you and say it's okay, but what should an employer do in that situation?
The employer does need to share that information. It is really important that they advise the employees that another employee or an employee's family member has tested positive. So you do need to be respectful of that employee's privacy, but in a close-knit group, they're probably going to know anyway. Because
if you're not there.
If you're not there, and employees talk to each other and they're on Facebook and they're so a lot of times the employees are going to know anyway, but as employers, it is not our job to reveal exactly the identity, but it is our job to alert them that a coworker has tested positive, and for employees that this coworker really worked with very closely, you probably have to go ahead and tell them who it is, because it would be important for them to go out and get tested.
Sure. That's great advice. Thanks, Gracen, and just some insights. Another question is, so if this is an employer that said that they're in commercial construction and they have crews, they have job sites, they don't come in every single day. I know a lot of our examples were as people are coming into the office, but is there any recommendation or thoughts if they're, I think you kind of alluded to this, like a form for each site that they could record employee's name and their temperature as a precautionary. Is there any challenges with doing something like that?
I don't think so. I think the questionnaire and the form is a good idea. I know a lot of work sites don't have an office on site, but there's going to be a supervisor with a clipboard.
Okay. So it's okay for that person. So it doesn't have to be a certain person that does this for the entire organization. It could be micro sites that you could do that.
Right.
Okay.
There needs to be one person who's responsible, kind of the COVID coordinator, to make up a name. So there needs to be one person that is liaisoning with them. But then for different sites, yes, to have one person who's responsible but the questionnaires, the temperature may not be appropriate depending on the site, but to have the questionnaires, and they don't have to be long. And a lot of there are questionnaires available from the Society of Human Resource Management. You mentioned our ERISA attorney. That law firm is actually developing questionnaires for their clients. So seek advice from your own client and look for other resources. We can certainly be a resource to provide the information that we have, and I think that I happily do that. So whether they're a client of mine or not.
Absolutely. So one last question. Do you have any thoughts or an opinion on sending, the question is on sending an entire department home out of caution when a coworker tests positives have been in the workplace? So do you send them home automatically to contact a medical professional, or leave that to the discretion of each employee? And I feel like you kind of covered some of that. I think there's kind of two parts to this one.
Right. Well, of course, it depends on the size of a department, whether you're going to send 20 people home or 2. But no, the person that you need to send home and isolate is the one who has tested positive. But that's why it's important to notify their coworkers so that they can make arrangements to go out and be tested, or to get teledocs have become really effective, because our doctors are absolutely overwhelmed right now. So it's important for them to continue monitoring their own symptoms, and to disclose if they do show symptoms, and to make sure that they are tested themselves. And it really is important to communicate employees that, look, it's not tattling. If you are aware of a coworker that's showing symptoms and they have not disclosed it, you need to let them know. And also, interestingly enough, employers are being encouraged to notify the Department of Health when they have an employee that's tested positive, so it can be tracked.
Okay.
Okay, where were they exposed?
Perfect. Well, I know we are closing in on our time and actually very thankful for this. The thing I learned today, Gracen, you just coined, see, the legend always has great ideas. You just coined the phrase a COVID coordinator, the CC, our COVID coordinator. So I appreciate that one too. So Megan, I'm going to pass it back to you to close this out.
Well, thank you so much, Gracen and Kaci, for your time today and sharing this valuable information. And we would like to thank all of you for joining today's session. Please follow us on social media as we continue to plan more webinars related to COVID-19 and its impact. Part 6 of our webinar series is scheduled for next Thursday, May 7th at the same time. That session will feature CEO Jeff Mosley from the Texas Association of Business and Chad Warmington, CEO and President of Oklahoma State Chamber. And we will be discussing the path forward for Texas and Oklahoma. Also, we have COVID-19 resources available on our website, so please take a look for more information about that. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day and stay safe.